in Hampshire. We then quickly grow to 3 counties. Turnover, the company is just shy of 700k. So, from a standing start, we were doing some very impressive things. But as I say, I came to a stage where we needed further investment. We needed to really look at what the future would look like. And we were approached by the chairman of Planet, who came across and said, look, we're trying to get into counties. We keep hearing your name. How can let's have a coffee, let's have a chat and see what we can do together. And so I think it worked at the right time for Planet and for ourselves. So an acquisition was completed on the basis that I would stay and run the company, not from 3 counties all of a sudden overnight to 7 or 8 counties. So there was a lot of work ahead. It was a challenge that I thrived upon.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest on the show this week is Chris Vertannes, CEO of UK Elite Sports Group. Chris has spent more than 20 years in the sports coaching industry, helping to encourage independence, diligence and fitness in football and rugby. Now working under the umbrella of UK Elite Sports Group, his team continue to provide sports coaching across southern England and are expanding to new continents. Growing up as one of 10, he and his family had a passion for sport. Starting his first business off the back of community coaching at Southampton FC, he's built up a wealth of experience, professionalising coaching and working with children. Enjoy the show. Right, it's a real pleasure to have Chris Vertannes joining us today, founder, CEO of the UK Elite Sports Group, a collection of businesses with a shared mission of improving sports provision across the UK and globally. Chris, it's great to have you on today, mate.
Thank you very much, James. Pleasure to join you today.
Really, and we're just having a quick chat off the record there, and I think it's good to talk about connecting online, and I'm sure we're going to get into it as we go through. But what we tend to do at the start of each pod is just give you a bit of an introduction, try and take you back to childhood really and see how that's kind of shaped your sporting path, your career, and your kind of decisions in terms of launching a business and growing it. How would you best describe your childhood if you could go back? Great
question to open up things with. And my childhood was, very proud to say, immensely happy childhood. I come from a very close-knit family. I'm one of 10 children.
Wow.
5 boys, 5 girls. You would understand that from a sporting perspective.
Was 5-a-side then? Is it?
Yeah, various 5-a-sides were often played. And I think over the years, a number of different sports were played. And it really set the tone, really, in terms of my sporting ambitions and not so much my business, but very much so someone who is keen on trying as many sports as possible.
Yeah.
With that number of children, and by the time you have a friend round, or you go over to the park, it's quite easily into your 20s. So you found yourself playing different sports at different times of the year, of course. When them come round, you pick up your tennis racket, football in the winter and what have you. So.
And did you grow up in West London? You grew up in then?
Yeah. Born in Isle, West London. And say our family home was in Osterley. And very many occasions spent over in the park playing till it got dark, that kind of scenario. And I think, James, I found myself always the organizer. I found myself being the one that if we're going to play a game, let's play to the rules. Let's know the laws of the game. And really, I think that was a very early life lesson in terms of if you're going to do something, do it right. So I really enjoyed that aspect of my childhood, the actual the organising and the communicating with others. Even those older than myself, I wasn't shy to bring in where the boundaries lay.
Do you think did that come natural to you then, or was that kind of, I guess a lot of times when you're a kid, you kind of replicating what you see, whether it was school or older brothers and sisters and stuff?
Yeah, I think we're a family whereby we had our, mum and dad, the way they had guided us, rules were rules. Household and the chores, we had a calendar at home, which we followed to the letter of the law. If your name was beside that day, you did those said chores. And, it was lessons like that I feel that were valuable as a youngster, because you were always thinking about scenarios and consequences. If you were asked to do something, do it properly. The consequences are, if you don't, you'll need to do it again until it's done properly. And those kind of lessons in your younger years and your teens, that's going to stay with you for life. And I think it's that kind of upbringing and those kind of channels of communication, that boundary setting that I've inserted into my sort of business life.
Yeah,
One knows what to do and when and how.
definitely. And I guess we'll talk about the business as well, but in terms of that kind of standardization, setting the stuff, you've got a lot of staff out there delivering for you and delivering for the brand, setting that level of what's expected and maintaining it's always going to be a challenge if you've got that.
Absolutely. The principles, of the culture that we set, the responsibility that we have, working with, looking after children, is huge responsibility, more so now than ever before. But if I go back to, again, just having friends around, we looked after each other. What we did safe. And, I've brought that into the company culture in that we had a sort of a very simple recipe for success. We went with 3 very simple steps: safety, fun, and learn. Safety was always number 1.
Yeah.
You couldn't put any other order. That's at the top, safety. If it was safe and if you made it fun, the learning outcomes will soon follow.
Just comes along with it, yeah.
That was our principle, learning.
What was your kind of experience of PE in school? I guess going back then, in terms of what you do now on the business side, heavy focus on high quality delivery, etc. But in terms of your experience of PE or the environment of PE back when you went to school, was it much different to it is now?
Yes, it was. We had enthusiastic teachers as opposed to any qualified coaches coming into our school. Back in the primary school, sport was for the masses. We just, you played and there's no talent ID. There was no real progression. You just played whatever sport or activity you were asked to do. And it wasn't until I went to the secondary school, which was Gunnersbury Catholic School for Boys, and they had coaches. We had a very, very strict curriculum, which was followed and was actively encouraged in all the sport that we did. My recollection of my PE was positive, but only when I went into secondary school. And something I've been determined to change and help change in the time I've been involved in business, to make sure that we get some proper tuition as soon as possible in the primary schools.
I guess moving out of school, you've got that thirst for sport. I know you're talented footballer. Is that kind of how your journey followed itself as a talented sportsman? Was that kind of what was leading it, or was it academics? Or
a bit of both. Passion, being sport, being football in particular. I was asked to go for trials at Brentford Football Club when I was 12. And ironically, after about 3 years there, Brentford, it closed it wasn't an academy as such.
It was like centre of excellence or whatever.
Centre of excellence,
yeah,
kind of thing, yeah. And that was closed down due to a lack of finance.
Yeah, different to nowadays,
now, right? You're putting a lot of money into youth development. So, but even then, I think back, James, to the training methods. There was some advanced centres that I attended twice a week, and on one of the nights, I wouldn't kick a ball until the last 5 minutes of the session, because they were looking at fitness and durability. Now there's a whole sea change in attitude, and we'll talk about, working with world-class personnel and seeing the lessons that come from that. But yeah, so football, being involved in sport has always been my main passion.
Yeah, and were you always kind of entrepreneurial as well, or is that something that came along? I guess I'm really curious on the kind of origin story of the business and stuff, and how that came about. Was it something that you set out to do, or was it kind of something that organically came about?
Bit of both, really. I think it was my destiny that I'd be involved in a sports business. From leaving school, what I wanted to do was get involved into the family business and help my father, who had 3 petrol stations in and around London. And I could see how hard my father was working, having to provide for a large family. So what I wanted to do was help him as much as possible. So I got involved in that family business, did all my business management training within the Shell UK training centres that were national. So after a period of time working with my father, and during that time, obviously the tremendous amount of learning that I took working under him, his stewardship and his great persona and his attention to detail, an ex-lieutenant colonel in the army. He didn't suffer fools. And I was given no favours. As father-son, there was no such favouritism. Quite the opposite, in fact. I felt I had a lot more to prove to him in terms of the workforce there within the three petrol stations that we ran. But it was all tremendously valuable in terms of what I learned about managing people, customer experiences, setting the standards, and being true to yourself.
I guess at that time, as parents are kind of emigrated into the country, I guess at that time, that was a big move to start with. And then obviously running a business, running multiple locations and stuff.
Absolutely.
Maybe there weren't many people in this situation. Is good?
No. I mean, came from very humble beginnings. They came over to the UK in 1962 with 7 children in tow. I was the first to be born in the UK, followed by a younger sister and brother. So that completed the 10. But as you rightly say, James, the pressure was on from the outset, to come into the country with very little. Hard work and toil were very much necessities to provide for the family. And when you live under those circumstances and you see it and you feel it, breathe it and live it, I think it's something that stays with you. So I would like to feel that kind of passion to succeed, that willingness to learn, and that responsibility that we all have to improve each other's lives. I think that's very much part of me today.
Yeah, it's definitely going to sow the seed for kind of your approach to hard work and grafting and building up a business. So moving out of school, then when you kind of take that step to obviously you're going to working in the family business, but then was there a point when you thought, right, I'm going to launch? I guess I'm assuming it was Planet Sport at that time, Planet Education. What was kind of the genesis of that?
Well, what happened, in fact, James, was I went to take my football coaching qualifications and did that in the county of Hampshire. And the tutor, Sue Lopez, was at the time, the only female FA licensed tutor in the country, and the privilege of completing my course under Sue's tutorage. So after that course, myself and my younger brother, who attended the same course, were asked to do some work for Hampshire FA and Southampton Football Club. And that was great work. We absolutely loved it. We felt that having not completed the boyhood dream of becoming a professional footballer, to be a professional coach, being paid for something that you love doing, seemed very much the next best thing. That was really the start of my journey towards the coaching business. And I spent just shy of 4 years at Southampton Football Club, learned a great deal, worked with some tremendous people there, some of whom I'm still in contact with and friends today. And
was that kind of in the academies, like the more academy setup or the community? It was
across the broad, really, broadly working in the community, working in schools, working in different settings. So you had the advanced centres, you had talent ID programs, then you had the inner city school,
a real mix,
holiday camps and what have you. And I used to run the tour of the old Dell, where you'd take the children families after their birthday party, you'd take them round for a tour of the Dell into the changing rooms and what have you, and interact with whichever players seemed to be in at the time for treatment. And I've got great memories of people like Matt Letizier, Francis Benali, who would spend a lot of time with the youngsters and just talking to them, signing autographs and thereafter. And I just feel that was a great insight into professional sport and how important it was for people in professional sport to understand that we're all human beings, we all have a responsibility, and there was a great humility about those two set individuals that they would.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got really close access then at that time to the players.
Yeah,
and stuff,
it was
compared to now. Like.
Yeah, very, very up close and personal with a lot of players and coaches there. And as I say, the respect is still there today, and we still have meetings at the club with a few projects that we may be working on together in the future. That's very healthy. But in terms of moving away from Southampton, what I felt was at the time that I wanted to offer more. I wanted to offer a wider range of activities and sports to families. So Saints at the time obviously was just focused on football, and I wanted to provide a service for families. So, whatever sport that they want to do, I would like to provide a service for. So we parted companies and I founded a company, Team Elite, with my brother and sister. And quite quickly, I'll remember this figure very well, because in the first year, we attracted 212 families to our business. And that was the start of having our own sort of private enterprise.
Yeah, do you know what? I always try and ask that question in terms of when you knew you had something. I know, obviously the football was going to be popular, but was there kind of a moment, not a light bulb moment, but kind of a validation moment? So, all right, yeah, we made a good decision. Sounds like 212 families straight off the bat, significant number of bookings, etc.
Yeah, it was, because a lot of those families, what it meant to us was barometer, was a lot of it was repeat business. They were very loyal to us. And, if we were coaching the son, then the parent would come over, and part of our service is that we always got to know, the family. They would say, well, look, daughter would like to do tennis. Can you provide tennis coaching? So our mission really was to identify, engage with, train like-minded coaches so we could expand our network of coaches, because at the end of the day, there was only set hours that myself and my brother could deliver. But it was important that we surrounded ourselves with good people who basically got it, just knew what we were about, what we wanted from our coaching sessions, and would upheld our very high standards. And that
What was it look like at the time, in terms of recruitment and finding those individuals? Because I guess that infrastructure that we have now and kind of almost the pathways through college and apprenticeship stuff, that wasn't available then? Was it more like trying to recruit from coaching courses and stuff?
You're right. It wasn't, the pathways to coaching weren't there as such. But what we did was we grew organically. We had a lot of contacts at various governing bodies who appreciate the work we were doing out there in the community. And it almost became, people would come to us to see if they were good enough to work for us, which was a great way of growing, is that we set a very high bar. And so we were recommended a lot of coaches. And to be honest, James, we had people that had played very high level professional sport who had coached children, but thought because of their professional background that they would be suitable. And that wasn't and isn't to this day always the case. But no, our training days would be open training days. We would invite people to come and watch us, very much an open door policy. We wanted to show rather than tell. And yet they could pick up on the passion, they could pick up on the feel of our sessions, and that kind of growing the network of coaches that way, it proved successful.
Yeah, in terms of how the business has grown over the years, like now moving from the outset there to now you've got the group of companies, it's probably a good point to maybe talk about that setup. Impressive in terms of the breadth of what you're doing at the moment. Let's do that. If we look at what the group looks like now, and then maybe we talk about how we got to that point.
Yeah, okay. The actual journey then took, after a 10-year period, I think we hit our capacity in terms of our reach. We started in Hampshire, we then quickly grew to 3 counties. Turnover, the company is just shy of 700k. So, from a standing start, we were doing some very impressive things. But as I say, I came to a stage where we needed further investment. We needed to really look at what the future would look like. And we were approached by the chairman of Planet, who came across and said, look, we're trying to get into counties. We keep hearing your name. How can let's have a coffee, let's have a chat and see what we can do together. And so I think it worked at the right time for Planet and for ourselves. So an acquisition was completed on the basis that I would stay and, run the company, not from 3 counties all of a sudden overnight to 7 or 8 counties. So there was a lot of work ahead. It was a challenge that I thrived upon. And to that end, what we established was that we wanted to consolidate in some areas, because the company was very customer driven. It was saying yes to a lot of contracts that perhaps couldn't be fulfilled. And this was probably a result of the first early years of the sports premium coming into play.
Right, okay. So we're looking at maybe, when was the acquisition? It's like 2015?
2007 was the acquisition of my company.
Right, got you.
And then 2005 was the first year of the sports premium. And then 2007 was when the acquisition was complete. And in 2011, we had further acquisitions that we picked up, and that's when the Elite brand came into play.
I'll just to pick up on that one. I know because something we haven't really discussed on the podcast before is kind of the acquisition, and then I feel like, especially in the industry, that everyone's got kind of their USPs and their way of doing things. And how did that work out in terms of, was it talks about the contracts, maybe different contracts that you might not have taken or maybe made different decisions on, but about the kind of culture and the two organizations coming together, obviously regionally as well, it can be different. How was that, and how did you kind of manage it if there was any challenges?
That was very difficult, and you're right to hone in on the fact or the point that when two companies come together, there needs to be a cultural first and foremost. And I think that was something that was a challenge, because I think with the larger organization, there was perhaps a very much a sales focus, turnover focus, with a slight maybe disregard for the actual profitability and the margin. So, I
guess that's an easy trap to get into as well, in terms of at scale, you need a certain level of turnover for the overheads and stuff.
It is. And I see companies today, James, falling into that same trap. And one of my missions, which for the coming years really, is to help businesses and guide businesses to avoid these traps, because it's very, very, the easiest thing is to be customer led and to grow the business. But there's a time to say no, there's a time to consolidate, there's a time to evaluate the profitability, the margins, and say, well, is that actually a good piece of business? Are we ready to service that? Got a sales department that's alienated somewhat from the operations department, then you've got an issue. Salespeople could be working on commissions, for example, serves their purpose to drive sales.
Yeah, I guess that's the classic 20 after school clubs versus a couple of contracts, a couple of larger contracts that you could service better.
Yeah, absolutely. But like I say, I think the actual setup of our sector now is, I see a lot of good work being carried out. Unfortunately, there's still some operators that are taking shortcuts, and I hope they will see the light, because there is no shortcut to success. There's no elevator to success. That you have to take the stairs, as they say. I think there's quite a way to go in terms of reaching a level of satisfaction within the sector whereby we feel comfortable that the practices out there are safe, and the children out there are being catered for and well looked after the best they can. And it's on us, it's on all of us to ensure that that is the case. It's not a case of finger pointing, it's a case of taking responsibility and being true to your values. And that's something that daily we impart on our team, at our schools, at colleges, when we give talks, is to encourage the right process.
You mentioned there about kind of daily messaging and stuff. What would you say you're leading the organization? What are kind of the recurring challenges that you used to face? I don't know if you still have them, like day-to-day kind of things that always come up, and it might be different now to what it was, but what would you say those ones are that challenge you regularly?
I suppose the challenge is, and more so with the last 18 months, 20 months that we've all gone through, is realizing that and accommodating people, making sure that our team, you look at a rota, it's robust, and you think, well, actually, we're well set for this term. And then you have a couple of illnesses, you have a couple of injuries, because a lot of coaches still play sport.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of isolations as well nowadays. As well.
Yeah, yes, exactly right. Self-isolating and what have they. So I think you've got I suppose the daily challenge is that one that it's operational. Make sure that you can fulfill your contractual obligations. And again, this is where I see some downfall in the sector, whereby if you've got two coaches going into a school because there's two groups and one isn't well, then what happens next? You can't have two groups taken by one coach. Yes, that goes on. So I think the operational challenges still remain today because of the human aspect of it. We work in a sector that's not, hopefully, being replaced by robots. Having a team that's dedicated to be out there in the front line and deliver on a regular basis and fulfill the contracts, fulfill your obligations. I think that's the all-important factor day to day.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously heavily based in the South, but I'm really interested in kind of the other ventures and the growth guess, your growth plans for the organisation and new projects? I know they might have took a, don't know if they have, maybe they have took a bit of a backseat. Like most organisations had their growth plan, most business had a growth plan that's been impacted over the last couple of years. But yeah, interested to hear more about the kind of the projects you've got going on and the kind of the opportunities out there.
Thank you, James. I think the sort of the global outlook, it sort of came from some very positive experiences we have of taking young footballers over to Sweden to participate in the world's largest youth football competition, the Gothia Cup. So we've been doing this for a number of years now and seen great benefit from young people going over to Europe and experiencing, life as a professional footballer, for example, just being part of a squad that has to go to the airport, has to look after its own belongings, has to report to training and match play, and then the rest and recovery. And it gave us a great insight into, gave the young players a great insight into what is required if you have aspirations to play at the top level. Then our focus changed a bit in terms of global travel because of our global plans took on another sort of level, if you like, when I met and employed a colleague of mine, Lakbir Singh. And Lakbir was the operations manager at the India Business Group, and as such had great experiences working out in India on very exciting projects. And when I brought Lakbir on board at Planet for the group operations, what we quickly discussed and decided to do was to find a way in which we can promote our services to those in India. And to this end, in January 2020, we embarked on a 2-week marketing trip to India, visiting Delhi, Mumbai, and Coimbatore in the south. And that 2 weeks was an incredible experience. We went with a very clear plan, and it really centered around 4 words: how can we help? And that was really our mission, was not to talk about us, but it was to learn about the organizations we were meeting with. And we were talking in front of and meeting the leading organizations in sport in India, government officials, the British High Commission in Delhi. So
this is almost like a trade mission, and I suppose you're going out there get really good research, understanding the market. I'm guessing that the education system's totally different, and starting from scratch then, ground zero then in terms of learning.
Absolutely right. It was a trade mission is a very good way of explaining our trip. And those 4 words, how can we help? What we didn't realize at the time was how prophetic those 4 words would become, because less than 2 months after our return to the UK, the world was hit by the COVID outbreak. So, our attention quickly turned to how can we help, how can we support? And to that end, what we did was our team put together a series of fantastic webinars where we would engage with audiences in India and talk about safe practices, COVID safe practices, share our experiences of working in schools under the outbreak of COVID. We talked about safe return to training post-lockdown. So we did a series of seminars and webinars with clients in India, which were very, very well received.
I was going to say, I'm guessing at that point you might be ahead, because I know obviously India had their outbreak slightly after ours, so maybe it's interesting when you're working on that global scale to see how things are moving quickly or affecting different. It
was incredible. I mean, we know ourselves in the UK what we'd gone through, what we were going through, and to hear and to visualize, having been there less than 2 months prior to the outbreak, to visualize in the settings that we visited with the vast numbers in India, isolating and social distancing is not going to be straightforward.
Yeah.
We just felt that, whatever level of support we could offer, we were there for them. And that's been the case. We've got tremendous relationships that we're building, and the plan remains in place. The timing has been altered, but the plan is to go on a second trip in 2022. But also, when the time is right, we have inbound tours to the UK. So the connections that we have, the teams, the squads and the representative teams that we're talking to out in India can come to the UK and be trained by our coaches whilst enjoying, the cultural side of a tour to the UK and visiting London and the sites. So we've got grand plans in place. I say the timing has been altered for obvious reasons, but the passion for sport in India is evident.
I wasn't going to say untapped market, but for certain sports it definitely is, isn't it? Obviously cricket's massive.
Cricket
IPL,
is massive,
etc. But
yeah,
football, rugby, other sports, I'm assuming they're going to be like some of the fastest growing
very much
sports
so.
in any.
Very much so. The success of the IPL has encouraged a lot of activity out in India, and now you've got the ISL, which is proving popular, and you've seen great numbers attending and participating in various sporting events in India. And I think, you're right, the likes of football and rugby are going to be massive growth sports in the coming years.
Mm-hmm. I guess
Any way we can help, we will.
Yeah, I was going to say fast forward in maybe 5-10 years. Are you looking? Is the end goal or one of your aspirations to maybe have an office set up out there and kind of replicate what you're doing here, or is it that kind of tour model?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've got some very solid connections and contacts out there, and I think with the experience of the India Business Group, who are pivotal to our plan in terms of facilitating our trips. The chairman of the IBG is Lord Patel, just taken over the chairmanship of Yorkshire Cricket Club. So guided by Lord Patel, Amarjit Singh is the CEO of the IBG. These kind of connections make it invaluable for us in terms of experience and setting the pathway to engage with the right people, because it's a long way to go to waste resource. So we do want to help, but you can get swamped with inquiries. So to channel that best way we can and to work with the Department for International Trade, as we do, and the British Commission, I think this is all, extremely valuable work in terms of assessing where we are today and benchmarking what we can do in the future.
Yeah, no, just really excited for the business, I'm sure, like in terms of market size as well. It's like, assuming it's the second biggest, it's China, but if you combine like Southern Asia, it's got to be more than 1 billion people or families, etc.
Yeah, well, a population of 1.3 billion.
Right, so hopefully you won't struggle to find coaches.
I need to check that. But
Exactly.
I think that was accurate stat. But yeah, you can see the huge potential and the amount of work. So it won't be UKESG, riding out there doing it on its own. It'll be a network of companies. And this is what I'm excited about, James, is that we're already in advanced talks with several leading sports organisations here in the UK about being part of our journey.
Brilliant.
Can't do it on our own, and we wouldn't profess to be able to deliver everything. I think we need to collaborate. You need to look at established partners and put in solid working parameters in place so we deliver on our promise, and that's going to be all important. Definitely.
I think that's something we've seen in terms of one of the themes is, as we've been doing these interviews and speaking to leaders in the industry, is that the industry is maturing all the time, right? If this was 10, 15 years ago, you might not get that collaboration between the major partners and stuff. And now everyone kind of seems to, I guess if we all come together, everyone wins kind of thing.
I think that's what
needs to be done. Yeah.
James, you're right. That's one of the biggest changes I've seen is the openness to collaborate now. Also, the pandemic had a part to play in that. I think people have felt a bit more vulnerable than perhaps they have in the past. The belief in that we can do this on our own, doesn't always stand up. And I think it's taken maybe a lesson from the pandemic for us all to reassess our operations and think, well, actually, could we link in with another said organisation which will help us deliver this at a higher level? And there's no shame in that. And I think years ago, I think there was. It was
it's like every man for themselves.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
No, so obviously loads of challenges coming up in terms of cultural fit and stuff like that, and a massive scale in terms of the projects you're embarking on. But I'm really interested in, we ask a couple of more personal questions around your philosophy and stuff. If there's anything around kind of business leadership or an approach to business that you've kind of created anything, or do you have any kind of commandments that you live by in terms of leading the business?
I think people use the word passion a lot. I see that thrown around a lot. We're very passionate about what we do, and that's fine. Passion is obviously a key quality driver for a lot of people. But I think a willingness to learn, to be humble, to actually not think that you know everything about your business or everything about your people. Life changes and quickly. The last 20 months have taught us that. I suppose I have a couple of sayings. One is, if you think you're the finished article, you're finished.
Yeah, that one.
Very, very true. And there's another one that I think that we had the very, very great privilege of working with Eddie Jones, the England rugby head coach. Eddie did a masterclass session for us with one of our partner schools, the ACS Cobham, and it was tremendous. What a personality, what an aura that man possesses. But he had a saying which we all picked up and we use to this day is, we win or we learn. And I think that's, again, a great lesson in business, family, not to think of everything as a win or a loss, but life's about learning. So continue that learning journey.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to learn when you win, right? It's a lot easier to learn when you make mistakes or lose.
Yeah, I think mistakes are very much part of life. And, I think we all got to accept that. And the quicker you learn to accept mistakes as part of success, the better.
Last question from me, Chris, it's a reflective one. What we always do is trying to think about, reflect on kind of our journeys. And if you could go back and give yourself some advice as you were starting out either in business, like after starting Team Elite or leaving school, if you go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Always put family first.
Yeah, love that. It's easy for us to forget that as well when you're trying to run a business and get your head down and work all the time. Yeah,
I've made so many sacrifices on a family level because running a business, you're just totally absorbed.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
It's over. And that is probably something I would take as a piece of advice, is they actually put family first. There wasn't work-life balance. That saying didn't exist those years ago.
No.
But it's so true. And it's so in today's world.
No, I love that, Chris. Thank you so much. And also, I really appreciate you coming on talking and speaking about your family and stuff. And I know it's been a challenge at the moment. And yeah, thank you for your time. We will share all of links and stuff, things we've spoken about in the show notes. And hopefully we'll have a lot of organisations reaching out and wanting to get involved in trying to go over and break India and get a part of the
Thank you, James. There. Thank you. I think it's been an absolute pleasure being a part of your podcast series. And you mentioned my family, and I'll probably close on this. I dedicate this to my mother and father, who I lost in the last 20 months. So hopefully they're looking down very proud today.
Sure they are. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.